I understand that a lot of my videos recently have been a little bit doom and gloom, haven't they? But I do hope that sharing my personal experiences with my gambling addiction and with other life obstacles, hopefully that's been of some help to people, of interest, and maybe it was rung a few bells and made people feel like they're not quite so alone in their situation. But what I want to talk about today is actually one of the most interesting topics I think I've talked about for a while, certainly from my perspective. And it is something that is actually a little bit more encouraging, a little bit more positive, if you dare believe that. Before that, I hope you're keeping safe and I hope you're keeping sane. Thank you for coming back to the channel. If you're new around here, welcome. If you're not new around here and you're not subscribed, I do ask you to hit that little subscribe button. In a very YouTubery way, I'll tell you that 70% of you who watch these videos regularly aren't subscribed. So yeah, give me a little dopamine hit, because I don't get as many as I used to, and just click that subscribe button for me, and that'll be much appreciated. Very quickly, finally, thank you to Mike Edwards, who's actually become the first member of the channel. A little while ago, I did mention I've set up a membership thing, partly really to shut YouTube up and stop them badgering me to set it up. So I didn't expect anyone to join, because you don't really get anything for it, to be completely honest with you. But Mike Edwards has signed up, and mate, I really appreciate that. Thank you. Going away on a lads' weekend this weekend, so that'll get me first pint in. So cheers to you. So, what I want to talk about today is the potential death, or certainly the reduction in gambling in the UK, and how this is most likely to come about. Over the past decade or so, I'd say, certainly the last 5 or 6 years, we've seen a massive increase in gambling. And there's several reasons for this. I think we can partially blame the Blair administration for the deregulation of gambling in the UK. And this certainly initially saw the boom in FOBTs and the proliferation, if you will, of bookmakers on every high street. You know, it went from being maybe 1 or 2 bookmakers in a town to 5 or 6 on every high street, or possibly even more than that. Alongside that, there has been increased accessibility to gambling, not only on these on high street bookmakers, but also online, with the massive boom in both online bookmaking and online casinos. And running parallel with this, of course, we have seen the industry grow, become far wealthier, and this has caused so much competition that the increase in gambling advertising and gambling promotion across all platforms has been exponential. And this has led to a significant increase in the number of people who are gambling either casually, or people who started gambling casually, and ultimately a percentage of them will develop an addiction. So I think ultimately the way this is going to end, and the way we can reduce the levels of gambling addiction in the UK, and I'm sure this applies to pretty much any country where you're watching from, is twofold. Now, firstly, regulation. It would be remiss not to talk about gambling regulation. We've seen a shift in sort of gambling habits because of the regulation that was brought in for bookmakers. In fact, the fallout from the latest FOBT regulation was substantial to bookmakers. They lost an awful lot of customers, and the bookmakers closed an awful lot of stores. It hasn't killed them entirely, which is more the pities as far as I'm concerned, but that's my personal opinion. It would, of course, be remiss to say that a lot of these people haven't just probably shifted their gambling habits and gone online, where we are also seeing an increase in regulation, certainly around online casinos, where the slots are being slowed down, removal of autoplays and all that sort of thing. So regulation will certainly play a part. We saw it with the smoking ban, didn't we, inside and in pubs. Of this harmed pubs probably more than it harmed the tobacco industry. However, it did stem the curve of new smokers. Ultimately, smoking became less accessible, less viable. You couldn't just light up a cigarette on a night out, and it may have prompted a few people to quit. In the same way that these new regulations, whilst they don't, make gambling illegal, they may reduce the desirability of the behaviour, and they may actually trigger an awful lot of people to decide, well, actually, now is as good a time as any to address this and to actually stop gambling entirely. It may also discourage new people who try gambling online and decide that actually this isn't for me, this isn't much fun. And hopefully, again, that will in time lead to a squashing of the curve, dare I say, of new people coming into this addiction. Regulation, however, is never going to be fully successful. We know this from experience. Even if you made all forms of gambling completely illegal, it wouldn't mean that gambling would suddenly disappear overnight. Certainly, it would cause a significant reduction in the law-abiding citizens who do then gamble. However, we know that prohibition and just removal of the legalities around it don't stop an addiction. They don't stop these vices from existing. If we think obviously about prostitution, illegal drugs, all these sorts of things which are by all measures illegal, they still exist, and we know they still exist. So what else can we do to stop new people coming, trying gambling and getting addicted? Well, I think it's going to come down to societal attitude. And just to sort of elaborate on this, let's talk about smoking. If we go back to the First and Second World Wars and beyond, probably right up to the 80s and early 90s, smoking wasn't in any way demonised. It was very much a socially acceptable thing to do. In fact, there was probably more smokers at some points than there were non-smokers, certainly amongst men. Smoking was seen as a fashionable thing to do. It wasn't well known that the health ramifications of smoking weren't as well known. And certainly weren't as respected or taken as seriously as they are today. Smoking was very widely acceptable in society. You could do it indoors, and at times you could smoke in your office, and pretty much anywhere. So it was a societally acceptable thing to do. Over time, the health implications have become far more known, far more publicised, and alongside regulation, this has led to a reduction in people taking it up. The social ostracisation of smokers through the implementation of smoking areas, where basically if you want to have a cigarette when you go to the pub, you have to go outside and stand in what looks like an abandoned bus shelter. The ostracisation of smokers has made it less appealing to people who, are social creatures. People don't want to have to disappear and leave their group of friends on a night out just so they can have a cigarette. Smoking has also become seen as an antisocial thing to do. It's not considered fashionable or cool anymore. It's not seen in films or on TV, and it's not encouraged through any kind of advertising. All of this has led to a significant reduction in the number of people who start smoking. It hasn't necessarily stopped those who smoke already from continuing to do so. However, the massive increase in taxation, the increase in regulation, may well trigger people to decide that that is their point at which they choose to quit. And I believe this is going to be the main death knell of gambling, certainly, hopefully, here in the UK. Once societal attitudes towards gambling shift, it will no longer be considered the fun pastime, the fun activity that we see it as today. At the moment, you see young groups of lads out, particularly young lads, and nearly all of them, when it comes to football, have some sort of financial betting interest in the game. It's seen as a sort of fun group activity. It's seen as something that is cool and trendy to do. It's promoted by celebrities on the TV. It is the new smoking. Once we become, as a society, more and more knowledgeable and more aware of the significant harm that gambling addiction does and the proliferation of gambling addiction in our society, I believe that the societal acceptance of gambling will start to fall away. It will no longer be seen as a perfectly acceptable addition to a Saturday afternoon's football, or having a few quid in the fruit machine won't be considered just a harmless activity. There will become a certain social stigma attached to it. In the same way that young people are no longer taking up drinking. In fact, a large number of, I believe they're called Generation Z, are choosing not to drink at all and instead stay teetotal. This has again come down to societal shifts in attitude towards alcohol, a greater understanding of the health implications, and a shift towards more healthy living. Once we as a society start to fully understand how harmful gambling addiction can be, it will no longer be seen as a accepted, or dare I say even fashionable occupation, or pastime, not occupation. And I think that is starting to happen now. It's a far cry off, the death knells for gambling. But I think we are starting to see a shift in attitude. We're starting to see people's understanding of the dangers of gambling, and I hope in my own tiny little way I am adding to this. And once this effect starts to snowball and it no longer becomes socially or societally acceptable to promote gambling, that will see the fall off of online gambling promotion and all the rest of it. And it will see a certain level of ostracisation for those youngsters who are most prone to developing gambling addictions, and ostracisation by their peers whenever they choose to gamble. It will no longer be seen as an acceptable thing to do. And whilst, gambling addicts will continue to be gambling addicts, and the will only slowly die off, both sort of hopefully by getting into recovery, but also just due to the passage of time. The number of new gamblers who ultimately fueled this exponential rise in gambling premises, gambling availability, gambling accessibility, and gambling promotion, the same people that fed that exponential rise will choose not to even start, and eventually we will see that gambling becomes no more. Or certainly it will be at a level that smoking is today and will be viewed in a very similar way. And this isn't any criticism of smokers or anything like that. Let me know your thoughts. I think it's a very interesting topic, and like I say, on an optimistic note, which is not something you hear very often on this channel, on an optimistic note, it would appear that that tide is just maybe starting to turn, and long may it continue, may I add. Stay safe and sane. Thank you very much for all your support. Like I say, hit that subscribe button, and I will speak to you soon.